This is the second offering of Everyday Spirit, a ministry of St. James Episcopal Church in Lewistown, Montana. I am the Reverend Jean Collins, Rector of St. James. I'm very pleased to have with me today the Right Reverend C. Franklin Brookhart, Jr., the 9th Bishop of the Diocese of Montana. Bishop Brookhart was consecrated in September of 2003 and plans to retire, unfortunately, on November 1st of this year, 2018. Thank you very much for agreeing again to meet with me and to talk about your life and your ministry in this place and elsewhere. Perhaps it would be best for us to begin with you introducing yourself.
Well, I'm Frank Brookhart. I suppose there are many adjectives you could use to describe me. Certainly, I'm a husband. Next month, my wife and I will have been married 44 years. She has a business, a consulting business that she runs out of her home in Helena. And before that, she was a college professor. She continues that. She's now Professor Emerita of Education at Duquesne in Pittsburgh. We have 2 daughters, Carol, who lives in Helena, and her partner is Sean Kelly. And our other daughter is Rachel, who lives in Los Angeles. And Rachel's spouse is Amanda Carmichael. And about 3.5 months ago, they had our grandson, Rowan, who is doing remarkably well. So that's my family. I was a parish priest for 30 years before I came to Montana. 4 very different kinds of churches, 4 very different kinds of ministry. I'm also an author. I'm working on my 3rd book called The Language of Love, which everyone should buy about December. It ought to be out by Christmas time, I would hope. So that's enough, I think.
All righty. That's very good. Thank you. Regarding your ministry, what are some of the challenges that you have been faced with in the past in this diocese and beyond?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first 6 or 8 years of my time here was spent working on trust, transparency, honesty, and trying to help the clergy and the people of this diocese live into that reality. Those factors had been abused in the past, and it was time to try to be a place where healing could take place. It took longer than I thought it would. I was thinking that I could probably do that in 4 or 5 years, and it turned out to be more like 7 or 8. So that was the initial challenge. Since then, there have been a variety of issues that I would put under the umbrella of congregational development. Probably the chief thing I can do for congregations is to make sure that they have good priests. So we work hard at that, and I think we've been successful. I think we have as good a group of clergy as any diocese in the church, and that certainly includes Eugene. There are issues around Camp Marshall that we've had to deal with, physical issues at camp that needed a lot of upgrading. And we've just finished a capital campaign and then an upgrade of the main building at Camp Marshall, Brewer Hall, which is, I think, an astonishing new building now.
Yes.
It looks like the old Brewer Hall, but somehow it's been transformed. And I'm interested in seeing how it goes this summer. Mm-hmm. That and some new dormitory facilities are there at camp. So those have been some of the challenges that have been along the way. Mm-hmm. Probably the other one that I would mention is Ministry with Native people. As you know, Montana is the home of 7 major reservations. And the diocese, within, I think, living memory, has not been able to do very much. And I certainly didn't feel like I could do very much. Mm-hmm. But I spent several years working on getting Bishop Gallagher here because of her background and because she is a Native person herself, has been able to initiate, I think, some really good ministry among and with Native people. Our goal is to work with Native people to empower, not to do something to them, but to work with them. And she's very good at that.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a long-term ministry in Helena, isn't there? Yes,
that's the Tojindawagan Society. That word Tojindawagan is a Delaware term that means something like soaring spirit. I would call it resurrection, but they call it soaring spirit. A priest in the diocese, Joe Sheeler, who had been around 20 years, I think, or more, who is a Native person. One year was asked by the Helena Indian Alliance to do a Christmas Eve service. And he did that. And well over 100 people showed up. And that was the beginning of developing that ministry. I think a key to understanding that is relationships are crucial in the Native community, and he had the relationships. He had built them over 2 decades. Mm-hmm. And he worked on a Native Eucharist. He and I worked together on it a little bit. I think it's a remarkable piece of work that they continue to use, although Joe had to leave for another job years ago, but is much missed by them. At one point, it was the largest Native congregation in the Episcopal Church. I don't think it's probably that anymore, but they continue working out of the cathedral in Helena, and I think are getting stronger, especially in terms of their leadership.
Mm-hmm. Who is leading that now? Is that Bishop Gallagher?
Yeah, she is listed as their leader in their material, but the elder of the community is a man named Bill Felton. And Bill is the sort of person who holds things together.
Gotcha. So what other perhaps challenges or successes, we've talked some about challenges, would you list for not only the diocese, but your entire ministry, which has been 44 years?
44, yeah, almost 45 years. Well, here, the trust issues that I've talked about, and I think we've made some remarkable progress. There are still some folks who need to learn that the past is the past, but we're doing much better on that front. Issues with assisted congregations was a challenge that I think we, by and large, met pretty well. Working with the diaconal community, we now have a group of really, I think, very good and very active deacons. Work on Camp Marshall and developing that program has been very important to me personally, because over the long haul, camping ministry has been important to me and certainly to my daughters. And I think that has come a ways. It's not to say we're done on any of these things, but so I think those are some of the things. I guess the last one I would mention is most of our congregations, with maybe only one exception, has a significant social outreach in their congregation. Every single one, with one exception, I think. And some congregations have several. I think that's a marvelous statement to make. And certainly St. James here in Lewistown has sort of led the way in showing what a congregation can do in a town with your recycling work and the solar panels that we bless tomorrow, and the choir and a number of other things that this church is really doing well, I think.
Thank you. I think they are too. I'm very proud of them.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of very good ministries going on.
Yes, yes. The other, I suppose, factor that has been throughout my career has been ecumenical work. I've done a lot of that over the years. And I'm co-chair of the Methodist Episcopal Dialogue for our churches. We're about ready to approve a resolution of full communion. That for us won't happen until, I think, 2020 or 21, whatever the next General Convention is after this summer. And their schedule is a little different. Their General Conference meets every 4 years instead of every 3. And I think they go first. I think theirs is actually to 2020, and then we're 2021. But the materials are ready to go, and it's now working on getting better acquainted with each other.
Will that be, I am on the Ecumenical and Interreligious Committee at General Convention.
Oh, well, we're on the same committee then.
Oh, fun. So, but will that be one of a resolution that will be up for discussion there?
It's the resolution that committee will deal with is basically continuing the work, authorizing it for some more time and urging more study. However, I think the resolution may be on the Episcopal Church website. It's several pages long at least. And the theological statement undergirding that is probably 40 or 50 pages long. That I'm sure is available.
Okay, very good. So what do you perceive might be, as the diocese is now currently, some of our challenges?
Yeah, and the diocese, of course, is in well into the process of getting ready to elect a new bishop. It'll be interesting to see what the nominating committee sees as challenges. But I see 3 or 4. One is the issue of stewardship as a spiritual discipline. And I don't mean just money, although that's certainly part of the picture, but stewardship is the idea of gratefully giving away your time and talent and treasure for the work of God. It's rooted in gratitude. It isn't a legalistic thing at all, but it's based in gratitude and the call that all Christians have to be givers rather than receivers. It's Jesus himself who said, it's more blessed to give than to receive. And I think everything about his ministry says that we're called to be giving people. That's one of the challenges. When I look around, there are issues of money and lack of same everywhere. And I would say of energy as well. I wish I would see a higher level of energy and excitement. And again, I think that's based in gratitude. Another would be evangelism. We do, I think, very well in reaching out to the community in terms of service, but how to do evangelism, that is, in word and deed, proclaiming the good news of Jesus. How do we do that? That's a touchy subject. You've been a priest a long time and know that all you have to do to shut down a sermon is say the word evangelism, and everybody clicks off. I think there is an Episcopal or an Anglican way of doing evangelism that we need to explore. I think in my mind, I know part of it, but I don't think I have it all figured out for Montana yet. And I think that's something that the next bishop can work on with the people of this diocese. A way to be able to speak to people about what's on your heart, to invite people, and to welcome people without being rude or confrontive or ill-mannered about it. I think for many people, when you say evangelism, you have visions of someone on the street corner coming up and buttonholing you. And that's not at all what I think would be helpful. Certainly not in Montana. I think there are challenges as well in regard to younger people. By that I would mean people 40 and under. Both of my daughters are in that category. It's a generation that is intensely tense about service and caring, and I think they're looking for, from everything I know and read and experience, they're looking for a serious church. They're not looking for entertainment. But they're also very cautious about making commitments to each other, to a church or any organization. And I think they probably have some good reasons for that. This is not a negative or a critical comment. I think it's just a description. And I think they, along with the rest of our society, at this moment, are really in need of the message of good news, a message about love and hope and inclusion and caring, that some people who carry the name of Christian don't seem to have captured. So
I agree. And I think we took a step forward in a very public way with the presiding bishop's sermon.
Oh yeah,
the royal wedding.
That was just stunning. And boy, people have picked that up. I've been astonished at, Saturday Night Live, the Today Show, View, a whole bunch of other things. I'm told that people on the streets in New York are stopping him for selfies.
Oh.
And
doesn't surprise
no,
me.
he is a very extroverted person who loves that kind of thing. All I can say about that sermon is I think it highlighted just exactly what the good news is about and what people really need to hear from the church.
Absolutely, I agree.
Now, some people said it was too long. I don't think 13 minutes is too long. And some people thought it was too enthusiastic, but that's Michael. That's the real, he's that way all the time. In fact, he was a little restrained.
I thought so too.
So he knew where he was preaching and how to do it. And I thought it was marvelous.
I agree. Well, you mentioned briefly being an author. Mm-hmm. The first book you wrote, Living the Resurrection, Can you talk some more about resurrection?
Sure. That, in my mind, has been the kind of vision that I've had for this diocese. I think it's the bishop's job to lay out a vision, and I have tried to lift up the resurrection in terms of being a transformed and transforming community of people who have been touched by the resurrection. I think this diocese had been on a cross for a long time before, and it was time to move on to the other part of that great central event, resurrection. The book was about how to live into it. I think the resurrection addresses some pretty significant issues that we have, issues of fear, purpose, meaning, that is, guilt, how you face the future, what shape does your life take? I think those are all addressed by the resurrection, which is really a statement about the victory of God's love and God's life for the entire universe.
Mm-hmm. And then you wrote Journey with Jesus, and you're working on a third book.
Yeah, Journey with Jesus sort of took up where the first book left off, and I added to it chapters about the incarnation, the birth of Jesus, baptism, his death, his crucifixion, as well as the resurrection. And I was trying to talk about the shape of the good news in terms of Jesus' life more than his teaching, although his teachings are invaluable, but how we deal with that and how that affects the way we live. The one I'm working on now is called The Language of Love. It's the subtitle is A Basic Christian Vocabulary. I have 30 words that I've written little chapters about. Things like love, redemption, Jesus, the Trinity. I just finished a chapter where I explained everything.
Good, you can use it tomorrow. Huh?
As a matter of fact, I will. I have contracted to have it done by the end of July. And the publisher, I think, will, if they follow past patterns, will then get it out relatively quickly. So, yeah.
Very good. So, in your retirement, do you have plans to continue your writing? Is that?
Yeah, I hope so. I don't know what that might be at the moment. I tend to want to write out of something that I see as an issue or a problem. The first two books were addressing what I thought was a kind of Christological drift in our church. I think our presiding bishop has, in his own and different way, addressed that very effectively. And in the third book, the issue that a lot of people don't grow up speaking the vocabulary of the faith. And the word faith, what do you mean by that, for instance? Or when we talk about salvation or sacrifice or prayer. I grew up really in another generation where it was assumed that most people would know something about that. I don't think we can make that assumption at all anymore. I think there are a large number of people who hear the language and say, that's intriguing, but I don't know the content. And that's what I'm trying to address there.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Do you have other plans for your retirement other than visiting your grandson?
I'm going to visit Rowan a lot. I'm hoping to take him to a baseball game this summer. I don't know if they will let 6-month-old kids in Dodger Stadium. No, not really. Sue and I haven't had a chance to talk in very much detail about what what the future might hold. And while I am retiring, I'm not dead, and I would prefer to do some things just at a slower pace. It's interesting, in our church, bishops don't retire. The official word is resign. And you have to have the permission of the other bishops in the church to do that, which they have given. But the understanding is bishops don't retire, they just resign and then do other things. And I can think of a lot of other things that might be possible, depending on what doors are open for you. So.
Good. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No. Thank you for this opportunity. This is very pleasant to be able to kind of sum up some things here near the end of my 15 or 16 years here. Thanks to you and to Kathy Marcel, who's the technical advisor on this project, and the people of St. James Church, of course. So thanks.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your ministry amongst us, and thank you for agreeing to chat today. Appreciate it.
Glad to do it.